Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we are diving deep into a book that's, well, it's pretty thought-provoking. It's called The Wisdom of Insecurity by Alan Watts.
Oh yeah, Alan Watts, The Wisdom of Insecurity. It's a classic.
It is a classic, and you know what's wild? It was published way back in 1951.
1951.
I know, right? But it's amazing how relevant it still is today. Like, we're going to talk about how this human need we all have for certainty can actually end up causing us more anxiety.
Yeah, it's almost like a paradox.
Yeah, it really is. And how maybe like the path to a more fulfilling life is actually about learning to embrace the unknown, all that good stuff.
Makes you think, huh?
Definitely. So, what I found really interesting about Watts is how he kind of just dives right in and challenges this like deep-seated need we have to feel secure.
Especially in a world that's like constantly changing.
Exactly. It's like, good luck with that, right?
Right, and he argues that this whole pursuit of stability can actually create more anxiety than it relieves.
Oh yeah, he's got this brilliant analogy about trying to mail a package of water.
A package of water, I'm intrigued.
Right. Can you just imagine that mess? It's like the ultimate recipe for disaster.
Okay, I see where he's going with this.
And that's exactly his point. You can't just contain something as fluid and ever-changing as life in a rigid, fixed package.
It's got to go with the flow.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So instead of trying to control the uncontrollable, maybe the key is to learn to ride the waves, so to speak.
Embrace the chaos.
Embrace the chaos, exactly. So Watts calls our modern era the age of anxiety, which, I mean, come on, how true is that?
It's like he was writing for today.
Right. And he thinks this obsession we have with chasing happiness through pleasure and material possessions, it just feeds this anxiety.
Totally. It's like this never-ending cycle of wanting more.
Always wanting more, always chasing the next thing. Like, if I just get this new gadget or this promotion, then I'll finally be happy.
But it never really works that way, does it?
It doesn't. We get a little taste of something good, and boom, we're already craving more.
We're wired for that.
It's true. And then there's this fear of letting go. Like, if we don't cling to things for dear life, they'll slip through our fingers.
This is where Watts brings in this really fascinating concept called the law of reversed effort.
Law of reversed effort. That sounds deep.
It is. Basically, it means that the harder we try to grasp something, the more likely we are to miss it.
Oh, like trying to force yourself to fall asleep.
Exactly. The more you try to force it, the more awake you become.
Makes total sense.
Yeah.
It's like that saying, a watched pot never boils.
It's the same principle at play. When we're constantly fixated on what we want or what we fear, we actually create more resistance.
Yeah, it's like we're blocking our own flow.
Right. And this brings us to a really crucial point Watts makes. This idea that our sense of self, this separate fixed I, is mostly an illusion.
Whoa, okay. Mind blown.
I know, right? It's a big one. We tend to think of ourselves as these solid, independent beings, but Watts suggests that it's more of a mental construct than an actual reality.
So like we're not really who we think we are.
It's more like we're constantly changing and evolving, like everything else in the universe. To illustrate this, Watts uses this cool thought experiment.
Okay, I love thought experiments. Hit me.
Try to think about yourself reading this conversation right now.
Okay, thinking about myself reading.
As soon as you do that, you create this separation. There's the you that's thinking and the you that's reading.
But they're both me, right?
Exactly. But is there really a separation, or is it all just one continuous flow of experience?
Whoa, okay, I see what you mean. It's all connected.
It is. And that's the point Watts is trying to make. He uses this metaphor of a great stream to describe life.
A stream, I like that.
It's like a river, always flowing with ever-changing ripples and currents.
And we're just part of that flow.
We are. Our attempts to grasp onto fixed ideas and definitions within that flow are kind of futile.
So like trying to define exactly who we are and where we fit in is a bit of a lost cause.
It is, because everything is always changing. And this leads to another important point Watts makes about the limitations of language and thought.
You mean words can't really capture the essence of reality?
Exactly. Words and concepts are useful, but they can also trap us in limited ways of thinking.
So we got to go beyond words to really experience life.
Exactly. He uses the example of money. Money is a symbol of wealth, but it's not wealth itself.
Right, you could have all the money in the world and still be miserable.
Exactly. If we confuse the symbol for the reality, we can end up chasing after something that won't truly fulfill us.
It's like that saying, money can't buy happiness.
Exactly. Watts is saying that true fulfillment comes from something deeper, something beyond the material world.
So what is that something deeper? Where do we find it?
Watts says it's about tapping into the wisdom of the body. He thinks we've become so reliant on our intellect, on overthinking and analyzing everything, that we've lost touch with our innate wisdom.
So we're so busy thinking about life that we've forgotten how to actually live it.
In a way, yes. Watts says our bodies have this incredible wisdom that we often ignore. Like, think about it. Your body knows how to breathe, how to digest food, how to heal itself, all without any conscious effort on your part.
That's true. It's pretty amazing when you think about it.
It is, and Watts believed that by tuning into this wisdom, we can start to navigate life with more ease and grace.
Okay, I'm sold. How do we actually tap into this wisdom of the body?
Watts emphasizes the importance of what he calls awareness. It's not about thinking or analyzing, but simply paying attention to the present moment with an open mind. He suggests that this helps us break free from the cycle of chasing future pleasures and fearing future pains.
So it's about being fully present in the now without judging or resisting whatever arises.
Exactly.
That sounds great in theory, but it's got to be tough to actually do, right? Our minds are always racing, pulling us in a million different directions.
It definitely takes practice. Watts tells the story about someone who's completely absorbed in listening to a piece of music. They're totally lost in the experience, feeling the music flow through them. Then someone asks, "Who are you?"
Oh, I can imagine that would be jarring, like totally pulling you out of the experience.
Exactly. And that's Watts' point. In that moment of pure listening, there was no separation between the person and the music. They were one with the experience. He suggests that this is how we can approach all of life. Not just the pleasurable moments, but also the moments of pain and discomfort.
So instead of running away from difficult emotions, we can learn to face them head on and allow ourselves to experience them fully.
Exactly. Watts believes that our minds, like really good shock absorbers, can learn to absorb the shocks and challenges of life without falling apart.
It's like instead of resisting the waves, we learn to ride them.
Perfectly put. The present moment is always changing. Resistance is futile because change is inevitable. We might as well learn to dance with it.
This is all so insightful, but I gotta say, it's also pretty radical. Like, it challenges so many of our assumptions about how we're supposed to live our lives.
That's what's so great about Watts. He doesn't shy away from challenging conventional wisdom. He pushes us to question our beliefs and consider new ways of seeing ourselves and the world. And one of the most fascinating aspects of his philosophy is this idea of creative morality.
Okay, yeah, let's talk about that. Morality is a topic that can get pretty sticky. It's often bogged down in rules and judgments. What does Watts have to say about it?
He argues that conventional morality, the kind that's based on fear of punishment or desire for reward, can actually be a roadblock to genuine change.
So, like, following the rules isn't enough. There's something deeper going on.
There is. Watts believes that true freedom and creative action come from a totally different understanding of morality. He says it's not about conforming to external standards, but about recognizing the interconnectedness of all things.
So it's about seeing ourselves as part of a larger whole.
Exactly. When we understand that we're all connected, our actions naturally align with love and compassion instead of just self-interest.
It's like a more holistic and interconnected way of being in the world. Our actions flow from a deeper understanding of our place in the grand scheme of things.
Right. And this leads us to Watts's reinterpretation of religion and spirituality. He sees them not as systems of belief, but as ways to experience this interconnectedness, what he calls the undivided mind.
Okay, this is interesting. I've always been a little wary of organized religion, but I'm definitely drawn to the idea of spirituality as a way to connect to something larger than myself.
I think a lot of people feel that way. Watts suggests that we often misunderstand religious symbols and concepts, like, for example, the idea of God.
Oh yeah, that's a big one. What's his take on that?
He believes that the concept of God isn't meant to be a literal description of a supreme being. It's more of a symbol for the ultimate reality that underlies everything.
So instead of seeing God as separate from ourselves, he's saying that we're all part of this divine interconnectedness.
Precisely. And that leads to Watts' idea of eternal life. He says it's not about surviving death in some kind of afterlife. It's about fully experiencing the present moment, where the separation between I and now dissolves.
It's about living in a state of such complete presence that the boundaries between self and other, past and future, all just kind of fade away.
Beautifully put. Watts believes that this experience of unity, of transcendence, is available to us in every moment if we can learn to see with the eyes of the undivided mind.
This is all so thought-provoking. It's like Watts is offering a completely new way of understanding ourselves and the world around us.
And it's a vision that's both challenging and incredibly liberating. It invites us to let go of our fear, embrace the unknown, and approach life with a sense of wonder and awe.
It's really interesting what you said about the limitations of language and thought. It's like we get so caught up in our heads trying to overanalyze and dissect everything. But what if the real wisdom is actually in quieting the mind, and listening to our bodies like Watts suggests?
Yeah, absolutely. That ties in directly with his whole idea about anxiety. He doesn't see it as something we should be afraid of or try to avoid at all costs. It's more like a natural response to the ever-changing nature of, reality. And actually, he says our anxiety can be a really valuable teacher if we're open to listening to it.
So like, instead of popping a pill or trying to push it down, we should be curious about what it might be trying to tell us.
Exactly. Think about a ship sailing through a rough sea, a ship that's too stiff, too resistant to the movement of the waves. It's likely going to break apart. But a ship that has gives some flexibility, it can ride those waves and make it through the storm. Watts suggests our anxiety is kind of like that storm. It's a natural force that we can learn to navigate instead of just resisting.
So we need to find that sweet spot between strength and flexibility, grounded, but also able to adapt to the changing currents of life.
Exactly, and that's where the wisdom of the body comes in. Watts argues that we've become so disconnected from our physical sensations. We've lost touch with this innate ability to be resilient. We're bombarded with all these messages about controlling our bodies, conforming to certain ideals. It's easy to forget how much inherent wisdom our bodies actually hold.
It's true. We're always trying to fit into some mold that doesn't quite fit, so focused on how our bodies look or perform that we miss those subtle messages they're sending us.
Exactly, and that disconnect from our physical experience, that can cause a lot of suffering. When we ignore our body's signals, push ourselves too hard, it creates tension and imbalance that can lead to, not just physical distress, but emotional distress too.
So how do we start to bridge that gap? How do we tune back into our bodies and tap into that wisdom you're talking about?
Well, it starts with cultivating what Watts calls embodied awareness. It's basically bringing our attention to our physical sensations, noticing the feeling of our breath, the way our feet connect to the ground, even the subtle movements of our muscles. It's about becoming present in our bodies as a way to ground ourselves in the present moment.
That sounds almost like a form of meditation, like a way to quiet the mind and tune into a deeper level of knowing.
You got it. And this practice of embodied awareness, it's not just helpful for dealing with anxiety, it's also super important for unlocking our creative potential.
Well, that's an interesting connection. How does paying attention to our bodies help us be more creative?
Well, when we're fully present in our bodies, not lost in thoughts or worries, it creates space for new possibilities to emerge. Watts talks about this state of awareness being the source of all true creativity. When we let go of preconceived notions and allow ourselves to be surprised by the moment, that's when inspiration strikes.
It's like we're opening ourselves up to a wider range of experiences and perspectives. We're not limited by our usual ways of thinking and seeing.
Exactly, and this brings us back to Watts's concept of creative morality. Remember, he says that conventional morality, with all its rigid rules and external judgments, it can actually stifle our creativity.
Because it's based on fear of punishment or wanting a reward, not on a genuine understanding of what's right.
Exactly. Watts proposes a different approach. He calls it creative morality because it comes from a deep understanding of our interconnectedness with everything. It's a morality that flows from recognizing that our actions have ripple effects. They impact more than just ourselves.
So instead of acting out of fear or just self-interest, we're motivated by a sense of responsibility to the bigger picture. Our actions become an expression of our connection, our care for the well-being of everyone and everything.
That's the heart of creative morality, and this is where Watts' idea of the undivided mind comes into play. He says, when we let go of the illusion of separateness, when we see ourselves as part of something so much bigger than our individual egos, our actions naturally align with love and compassion.
It's like we're tapping into a deeper well of wisdom, something that goes beyond the limits of our individual minds and connects us to something universal.
Yes, and that leads us to Watts' interpretation of religion and spirituality. He doesn't see them as systems of belief or dogma, but as paths to experiencing this state of unity, this feeling of oneness with everything.
It's not about blind faith or following rigid doctrines, but about a direct experience of connection, a sense of belonging to something greater than ourselves.
You got it. Watts suggests that religious symbols and metaphors, they're not meant to be taken literally, but as pointers towards this deeper experience. Take the concept of God, for example.
What's his take on that?
Well, it's often understood as the supreme being who exists outside of us, judging us, controlling everything. But Watts proposes a different way of seeing it. He suggests that God isn't separate from us, but rather the very ground of being the source of all life and consciousness.
So instead of looking for God somewhere out there, we can find that divine spark within ourselves.
Exactly, and this is where Watts' ideas about reality get really interesting. He suggests that the world we experience with all its seemingly separate objects and events, it's actually an illusion, a creation of our own minds.
Wait, so he's saying the world isn't real?
He's not saying it's not real, but that the way we perceive it is filtered through our own mental constructs, our perceptions.
Okay, I see what you mean. It's like our minds create the reality we experience.
Exactly. He uses this analogy of a movie projector. The images on the screen, they look separate and distinct, but in reality, they're all projections from a single light source.
So it's like we're all part of this big cosmic movie, playing our roles and experiencing the unfolding of events from our own unique perspectives, but ultimately we're all connected to the same source.
That's a beautiful way to put it, and that leads us to Watts' interpretation of eternal life. He suggests it's not about surviving death in some kind of afterlife, but about experiencing this unity, this oneness with everything in the present moment.
It's about letting go of our attachment to the separate self, the ego, and merging with the flow of life, the eternal now.
Exactly, and he says that this experience of unity, of transcendence, it's available to us not just in moments of religious ecstasy, but in every moment of our lives, if we can just learn to see with the eyes of the undivided mind. And that brings us back to anxiety.
Full circle.
Yeah.
So how does this idea of the undivided mind relate to anxiety? We started talking about anxiety as a teacher, but how does this perspective help us actually deal with it?
Watts argues that a lot of our anxiety comes from resisting the impermanence of life, trying to cling to a fixed sense of self in a world that's constantly changing.
We want things to be certain and secure, but that desire actually creates tension and suffering because the only constant is change.
Exactly. Watts suggests that if we can learn to let go of that resistance, to embrace the flow of change, we can transform our anxiety into a source of freedom and creativity.
It's about surrendering to the unknown, trusting that the universe is unfolding as it should, and allowing ourselves to be carried along by the current of life.
It's a radical idea, but it offers a profound sense of peace and liberation. And it's something that's been recognized in spiritual traditions all over the world for centuries. Like in Buddhism, for example, there's the concept of anicca, which emphasizes the impermanent nature of everything, the idea that everything is in constant flux.
And in Taoism, there's the concept of wu wei, which translates to effortless action or non-doing, the idea of aligning ourselves with the natural flow of the universe instead of trying to force our will on it.
Exactly. So Watts isn't coming up with something brand new. He's pointing to this timeless wisdom that spiritual seekers have recognized for centuries. And this wisdom gave us a powerful way to navigate the challenges of modern life, to find peace and meaning in a world that often feels chaotic and uncertain.
It's about letting go of the need to control everything, embracing the unknown, and trusting the wisdom of our bodies, the wisdom of the present moment.
And that's where Watts' ideas about creative morality come full circle. He suggests that when we're living from this place of unity, when we're not trying to separate ourselves from the world around us, our actions naturally become more compassionate, more aligned with the well-being of all beings.
It's like we tap into a deeper source of ethics, one that's not based on rules or dogma, but on a deep understanding of our interconnectedness with everything.
That's it. And for Watts, this is the essence of what he calls the transformation of life. It's not about achieving some perfect state of enlightenment or changing the world out there. It's about changing our perception of the world, our way of being in it.
It's about shifting from a mindset of fear and separation to a mindset of love and unity.
And that shift, Watts says, that's the key to unlocking a life of true freedom, joy, and creative expression.
Yeah, it really does feel like once you shift your perspective, like that everything changes. The world goes from something you have to control or be afraid of to something you can actually celebrate and enjoy.
That's the whole point of the wisdom of insecurity, right? It's not about getting rid of uncertainty or building this perfectly predictable life. It's about learning to live with the unknown, to embrace those unexpected twists and turns and find the joy in the fact that reality is always changing.
And Watts talks about how, embracing the unknown, that in itself is a spiritual practice. It's about surrendering to the mystery of life, trusting that there's a deeper intelligence at work, even when we can't see the whole picture.
He makes this great comparison to listening to music. You know, you can't control the notes or predict the melody, but you can just surrender to the beauty of the music as it unfolds.
And in that surrender, you find this sense of peace and joy that comes from just being present with the experience.
Exactly. And Watts makes sure to point out that embracing the unknown doesn't mean you become passive or give up on your dreams and goals. It's more about approaching life with this openness and curiosity, being willing to adapt to change, and trusting that you'll find your way.
It's like a river flowing to the sea. It doesn't try to force its way through obstacles, it just flows around them. You know, adapting to the terrain, always moving towards its destination.
Perfect analogy. It's about finding that balance between effort and surrender, taking action, but also allowing things to just unfold naturally. And this is where Watts' ideas about creative morality really come to life, when we're living from that place of trust and surrender, when we're not trying to micromanage every little thing. Our actions just naturally become more aligned with the well-being of everyone.
We're not driven by fear or self-interest anymore, so we're free to act from a place of love and compassion, and we recognize our interconnectedness with everything.
Exactly. And that brings us to Watts' final point, the transformation of life. And this transformation, it's not about reaching some perfect state of enlightenment. It's about continuously letting go of limiting beliefs and just embracing the fullness of life as it unfolds.
Waking up to the miracle of the present moment, recognizing that everything we need is already here right now.
That's the essence of the wisdom of insecurity. Letting go of fear, embracing the unknown, and trusting that life, with all its messiness and unpredictability, is unfolding exactly as it should.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into Alan Watts' The Wisdom of Insecurity, we're left with this invitation to let go of the need for certainty, to embrace the mystery of existence, and to live each moment with a sense of wonder and gratitude.
Remember the journey itself with all its ups and downs. That's the real destination.
Thanks for joining us on this exploration of insecurity. We hope you found some valuable insights to take with you on your own journey.
Until next time, keep diving deep, stay curious, and embrace the flow.
And remember, the only thing that's truly certain is change.